Good morning again, Bible scholars. Thank y'all very much for being in Bible class today. We're going to be in Luke chapter 16 in just a few moments, but honored to our first Sunday of the year be listening to Jesus talk to us. We're going to examine a really challenging parable this morning. This is probably the most difficult of the parables that Jesus told because it features a villain and because it has an especially surprising ending to it. But if you look at all of Christ's parables, you see that many of them feature villains and many of them have a surprise ending to them. But this one is especially controversial because it seems like unjust or crooked behavior is commended. And we'll get to that in just a few moments. But again, want to commend you for being in worship today, for being with us in pew today, many online also, and it's an honor really to be with you. Hope that your year has gotten off to a good start, and that we can have some optimism that this year is going to be a really good year, a year where we grow in the ways that we need to grow. I thought it was funny, I saw somebody talking about last year, they had a goal of losing 20 pounds. And they said they've only got 30 more to go to reach that goal. So that's not any of us, I suppose. Johnny, I wasn't going to say it in front of the whole family this morning making the announcement, but did that note really say that for the thing Monday week, the menu is beans and fixins? Does an announcement like that, does that just appeal to anybody except the starving people? I think beans and fixins. We might want to work on our advertisements or some things. So you grew up on beans and fixins, but when you got money, you quit eating beans and fixins, didn't you? You got on to something else, surely. I sound like an only child a lot of times, I'm sure, but Mama never fed me beans and fixins, so that's good. Are they black-eyed? How many black-eyed peas folks do we have in the house? Did y'all start you tried that last year too. Look how that worked out. So we might want to adjust the menu. I think I had pizza. All right, Luke 16. Controversial, really, parable. People get perplexed. At the heading in my Bible, this is not an inspired title for this parable, but some people refer to this as the parable of the unjust steward. What is a steward? A steward is a manager. A steward is somebody who takes care of not their own possessions, but the possessions of someone else. So in a sense, we're all stewards, we're all managers of the blessings that God has given us. So here we go. Luke 16, verse 1. He also said to his disciples, there was a certain rich man who had a steward, and an accusation was brought to him that this man was wasting his goods. So that's the way Jesus begins the parable. A parable that is sandwiched between two better-known parables. We've just ended up with the parable of the lost boy, the loving father, the older brother who had some issues, and then after this parable, we're going to be introduced to that rich man who was building. Who was building everything for himself and not even giving crumbs to Lazarus. So we got these two very familiar, maybe the two most familiar of the parables. The parable of the rich man and Lazarus, the parable of the prodigal son, and then we got this one. Again, how did he introduce it? A certain rich man had a steward who was wasting his goods. So he was not a wise, not an honest manager. I hear from lots of people today a modern version of this parable. It is difficult to find good help. That's the way this parable could be described. It is difficult to find good help. Verse 2, so he called him, the master, the boss, in a sense, our Heavenly Father, and said to him, what is this I hear about you? Give an account of your stewardship, for you can no longer be steward. There are many 2022 applications in this story, and this is one that's got to jump off the page at us. Give an account of your stewardship. That is something that we all will do. Paul told the church at Rome, so every man must give account of himself to God. And this now is accounting time for this man. Verse 3. Then the steward said within himself, so he's thinking, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? What shall I do? For my master is taking the stewardship away from me. And then he says this, I cannot dig, I am ashamed to beg. So we admire him in this regard, that he's honest about his situation. He honestly assesses himself. He realizes he's a lazy man. We're not proud of him for being lazy. We're proud of him for recognizing that's who he is. I'm not going to dig. Basically saying, I'd rather starve than dig. And he also says, I've got a lot of pride. I've got a big ego. I'm not going to beg. I'm not going to beg. So 2022 application, can we be honest about ourselves, our condition? Can we honestly assess ourselves? Am I lazy? I need to get going. Do I let my ego get in the way of healthy or better choices in my life? It's commendable. First, that he understands there's a day of a reckoning and I need to get ready for it. Same for us. But then number two, he realizes I've got some faults. He doesn't try to cover up who he is or what he is. I wish in his assessment he had determined to make some changes, but I don't see that here. So here's what happens. I have resolved what to do. This is verse 4. That when I am put out of the stewardship, he knows what's coming. He knows he's about to lose his job. They may receive me into their houses. So he's not going to work. He's not going to beg. What he sets out to do is ingratiate himself to other people so that because he has done them a favor, they will do him a favor. Perhaps give him accommodation, perhaps give him a job. Okay? And notice what he does. Verse 5, how he does this. So he called every one of his master's debtors to him. And he said to the first, how much do you owe my master? And he said, 100 measures of oil. And a measure, my friends, is probably as much as 10 gallons of oil. Oil was very expensive, very precious in those days. So 100 times 10, that's 1,000. That's a lot of oil. That's a lot of debt that he owes. So he said to him, take your bill and sit down quickly and write 50. Give yourself a 50% discount. Now let's think about this. Why does he recommend that? Is it possible that in some of his mismanagement, he had been overcharging these people? That he had been doubling what they owe and taking some of that for himself? In the examination that the boss, the master, had been giving him, obviously there was some corruption. Obviously there was some theft involved. Okay, he had what? It sounds like, looks like then he had been double charging people and taking the extra and keeping it for himself. And now he said, okay, I'll cut out what I was going to pay myself on this and they're going to be he's really not doing them any favors. He's being, maybe now finally that he's out of a job, he's being honest. And that's one theory behind this. Maybe he's eliminating the interest on the payment. Because they paid high interest back in those days. And we'll go through that. He does this with several. But what's interesting is the people he's making the deal with, they don't seem to have any qualms about, okay, I'll be in on this with you. I'll just mark that. They don't seem to be saying, why are you wanting to do me such a good deal? Why are you wanting to do me this favor? Didn't our moms teach us, if it sounds too good to be true, it is? Oh, I've fallen for that so many times. I'm hopefully getting wiser, but I don't have a lot of confidence in myself on that point. Many years ago, one of my favorite teams was going to a national championship game. And I was looking for tickets for myself and my sons, and it was way unaffordable. And I came across this deal advertised online. I mean, tickets were ridiculously low. And I sent off for them. Thankfully, I paid by PayPal. The envelope came to the post. We were actually in Chattanooga visiting Judy's daddy. The envelope came Federal Express there. And the people in the post office, somehow in their computer system, triggered them that this was potentially fraud. They opened the envelope. They didn't deliver it to me. They opened it there. And it was completely empty. And they sent me a message saying, we can't deliver, undeliverable. And they wouldn't tell me why. And finally got a hold of somebody. They said, it's empty. We believe that you've been a victim of fraud. And I contacted PayPal. They did an investigation. Long story short, I got my money back. But this fraudulent person who's trying to cheat me, he's down in Florida somewhere. I called him again and said, the envelope was empty. And you know what he did? He accused the people there in the post office. They opened that envelope and they stole those tickets. And I'm going to tell you, he was such a convincing fellow. I didn't believe that, but he was real convincing. And of course, they got cameras and all, and they reminded me they opened it under camera, and that obviously didn't happen. But there are people in our culture that will steal from us. And a lot of times it is in the form of a deal that really is too good to be true, and it is false. This guy, apparently in our parable, he's a sense a hero, but a villain. He's a hero in a sense because he's made some good decisions. He's prepared for the accounting. He's been honest about himself. But it's almost like he's encouraging others to be complicit in the cover-up of his crime. Have you noticed that whenever there is no supervision, it's like a 2022 application, when there's no supervision, there is opportunity for corruption. And the steward here, this fellow had been operating without oversight, it appears to me. He'd been trusted, and he wasn't worthy of the trust. We need accountability. It helps us. I've mentioned this 100 times, right? We do better when we're being watched, not for somebody to catch us doing wrong, but just kind of, when Mama's watching us through that rearview mirror, we're in the back seat, we're going to not be picking on our brothers, sisters much. When the teacher's in the room, when the coach is in the gym, we tend to behave ourselves a little bit better. I go to Ukraine, as you know, from time to time, and they have a saying over there that the policemen pay themselves. They're not paid much by the government, so they pay themselves through corruption, and no one's watching that. No one cares. Why were Republicans of the first century such hated people, these tax collectors? It is because they paid themselves. There was a certain amount that the tax collector had to give to the Roman government. Anything above that, they were permitted to keep. So again, obviously, that is a system that is meant for corruption. And that's what you're going to get. So this fella, he goes to, you can understand why this is a parable that causes difficulty to people. Because he goes to a person and he almost brings them in to the scheme to cheat his master. So verse 7, oh, by the way, he said to him, sit down quickly and write 50. Have you noticed that when we hurry our decisions, we oftentimes make a wrong decision? You ever been in a car dealership and they'll say, what do I have to do to get you to drive off of this car lot with that new vehicle? What deal do we have to make to get you? And you get phone calls. Y'all get these phone calls from these people offering you a cruise or offering you some great vacation, but you got to give them an answer right then. Judy and I have been dealing with leaks we've leaks in pipes and leaks coming through a different place in our house. And we had a guy came out a week or two ago giving us a bid on replacing something. And I won't go into all the ugly details, but he started out at a price of $90-something thousand. I know, exactly. And then he starts whittling it down. He said, now we got a special and I'll get 30% off. I don't know what that gets down to 60-something. And I'm going to cut my commission. And he's going to go down to 50-something thousand. Judy and I are sitting, we're thinking, there's no way. We're not even, that's just ridiculous, all that. And he says, but, and if you'll agree today, we'll give you another 10% off. And do you like pressure like that? You know, of course we said no. In fact, if he'd given us 90% off, the answer was going to be no. But I rarely make my best decisions when I've got to do it quickly. Now, there's some moments in our life when we have to make quick decisions, and that we make those decisions better if we've prepared our whole lives for that eventuality. Play the scenario. What are you going to do if somebody comes into your house to get your stuff? You don't want to be making that decision as it's happening. You want to know before. What are you going to do? We try to get our teenagers, right? We go over scenarios. What are you going to do when your buddy offers you a beer? We don't want you making your mind up when the beer is coming in your direction. We want you to know right here, right now, when you're in Bible class or when you're talking with your mom and dad about it, how you're going to react to that. So we rehearse these scenarios in our mind. Right? We don't like pressure. And I do think this word quickly, that's part of the deal here. You want this discount, you better do it right now. 50% off, right? It's going to 40 tomorrow and 30 the day after. You know, it's just quick decisions are not always the best decisions. You have comments, questions, thoughts as we're going through this? Anybody? Notice it continues here. Verse 7, then he said to another, and how much do you owe? And so he said, 100 measures of wheat. And that might be as much as a measure of wheat might be as many as a dozen bushels of wheat. So again, we're talking over 1,000 gallons of oil. We're talking about over 1,000 bushels of wheat. That's a lot of wheat. And he said to him, take your bill and write 80. So you're getting a 20% discount. It's interesting, there's no quickly here going on. Maybe because he didn't get the big a discount. Verse 8, so the master, isn't this shocking? So the master commended the unjust steward because he had dealt shrewdly. Now remember, that's not Jesus who's commending him. It's his worldly master who's commending him, a worldly master that had not been paying attention to what this manager had been doing. And then he says this, for the sons of this world are more shrewd in their generation than the sons of light. What in the world is that about? For the sons of this world are more shrewd in their generation than the sons of light. Let's say that we are followers of Jesus, so we are the sons of light here. So in what ways are people of the world doing something better than we're doing it? And just to think about that for a moment. In what ways are people of the world doing something better than maybe we're doing something? Yeah, Linda.
They're going door to door knocking.
Linda mentions going door to door knocking. That's kind of the direction that I'm thinking. For example, a world-class athlete. You think about what they go through to get that trophy, what they do to get that gold medal, what they do to get all those sponsorships that come with that. They go without sleep. They train in pain. They train in terrible conditions. They train in obscurity. They are, they put themselves through it to gain that prize. What if we Christians were as motivated to gain the heavenly prize as an athlete is to gain a temporary prize? That's the idea. Jesus said, if we're going to come after him, we need to do that, didn't he? He said we need to deny ourselves, we need to take up the cross daily and follow him. That doesn't sound like the most grandiose of lives. There is a gospel that is preached that some people refer to as a prosperity gospel. You follow Jesus, you're going to have plenty to eat. You're going to have fancy stuff. God will reward you materially, financially, physically, with better health. That's a lie, but it sure sounds good. But you got to decide quickly, to do that. We all have a tendency to buy a cheaper product. I go to a store, I look for clearance. That's the rack I look for. We all want to get the best possible price, best possible deal. When we do that religiously, then we got a challenge because the cost is much. Well, what about grace? I'm just telling us what Jesus said. Grace allows us the opportunity to carry the cross. Grace allows us the opportunity to deny ourselves. Grace allows us the privilege of following someone we're unworthy to follow. Another example of, let's say, people of the world. And there are politicians that are also in Christ. I get that. But just think about the typical politician. Think about all the signs being put up. That election is way in the future. And our community is littered with signs already. And those signs will stay up well after the election. Some are still up years after election. Anyhow, straying from the subject. But they go, and I'm commending this, they go door to door. They hand out their business cards, their political, little point by point agendas. They spend money for advertising on radio, on internet, on television. It is, insane the ridiculous lengths they go to get your vote, to get our vote. Well, what if we pursued souls the way a politician pursues votes? They're outworking us. That seems to be the point of the parable that Jesus is. All right, now I'll step on my own toes. What about parent of little athletes? I think about the trouble I went through to help Jordan. I think about all the days I was outside in bad weather, good weather, catching while he pitched, having balls bounce into my shins, and a lot of you know the pain of that, right? And throwing batting practice. I've had 2 shoulder operations. I blame both of them on pitching to Jordan thousands of pitches back in the day where he could groove his swing, okay? And we got parents, and I look sane. I look like a moderate compared to parents today. Taking their kids all over America, spending fortunes, the best equipment, the best training, the best of everything for a game. An important game, not diminishing it, but a game. And what if we, talking about myself too now, what if we tried to incorporate spiritual training in our hearts of our children to the extent we try to teach them to kick a ball, make a 3-point shot, hit the ball over the fence. You can understand why it would send a mixed message to our children when there's not quite the energy investment in a spiritual direction as there is in we want you to get that trophy. We want you to get that scholarship. We want you to be a major leaguer. And that's so far-fetched. That rarely happens. There aren't many Josh Willinghams that come out of this area, right? I saw a kid the other day. He was in the gym. He's in AA ball, and he's an Adonis. And that's probably about as far as he's going to go. He's worked so hard at that. And I commend him for that. I really do. I'm proud of him for that. But we don't want to so emphasize that we diminish the spiritual tension, the spiritual training, right? Sunday in our world, in many communities, is now just like any other day of the week. And that's not a good development for us. It's sending a bad signal. This is the Lord's day. And I think that parable is trying to direct us to see people in the world that have a passion for material things. And that's not all bad. It's not all bad at all. It has its place. It just can't be first place. And we can learn from the energetic politician or the salesman. You know, just think about the lengths that some people go to make a sale, the calls they make, the visits they make, the follow-up. If we had that passion for souls, how many more souls would be led to Christ? Again, I think that's the essence here that Jesus is trying to get us to see, that there are people of the world that are more highly motivated, maybe even in evil directions, than the people of light are devoted in good directions. Maybe that's what's going on here. What do y'all think? Are you mesmerized? Are you spellbound? All right. Now, what do you think about what Jesus says next? It's not over yet. Verse 9. And I say to you, make friends for yourselves by unrighteous mammon, that when you fail, they may receive you into everlasting home. He who is faithful in what is least is faithful also in much. And he who is unjust in what is least is unjust also in much. Therefore, if you've not been faithful in the unrighteous mammon, who will commit to your trust the true riches? And if you've not been faithful in what is another man's, who will give you what is your own? Isn't that a principle that is profoundly true? And then verse 13, no man can serve two masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or else he will be loyal to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and mammon. Another way of translating that, you cannot serve God and money, or God and whatever is competing with God for our thinking, our speaking, and our checkbook or our debit card. Isn't it a great truism that if a person can be responsible and do good with a little bit, he's rewarded, he's promoted, and he's given more responsibility? But if he can't handle the minimum responsibility, task, we're not going to say, okay, since you blew that little job, we're going to let you, figure out how to launch an astronaut into space, right? And it's also a principle that if we don't take care of property that belongs to someone else, how can we be expected to be blessed by God with our own property? We need to treat other people's stuff as if it belongs to us, as if we would like for them. You ever loan out stuff knowing how it's going to come back? If it comes back, it's going to be broken, it's going to be dirty, if it comes back at all. I mean, we're not anxious to loan that out to certain people because we know what's going to happen. And that seems here to be one of the points Christ is making. Let us be good managers of what we have, whether it literally belongs to us or belongs to another. And our mentality should be, it all belongs to God. When you read Genesis chapter 1, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. It is His. It has always been His. He never gave it to us. He allows us to manage it, to tend it, to be blessed by it, to enjoy it, to hopefully not to be entrapped or imprisoned by it. But it is His, and if it just when I do this with our possessions, it really has a transformative effect. And I don't always do this as well as I should, but when I think of this suit as being God's suit, as I think of that house as being God's house, think about that vehicle as God's vehicle, then it really helps me to take better care of it. It's like, you remember 1 Corinthians 6, 19 and 20. What does it tell us about our bodies? That they're the temple of the Holy Spirit. You're not your own. You're bought with a price. So that should help us. If we really take that to heart, it should help us to make better decisions about our bodies, right? Because it's really not ours. We're just kind of renting this in a sense, being loaned this by the Father very, very temporarily. And so we don't want to mistreat someone else's property. Oh, this is a sensitive area, but let's just hit it quickly and move on. Think with me for just a moment about self-murder or suicide. You know, one of the things that we try to make to people, points we try to make, and people are very emotional. People are not themselves. I'm not trying to judge their eternity or anything like that, but I want people to understand, you want people to understand that it's not their body to harm. It belongs to the Father. I'm not to harm Vicky's body. That'd be a crime. But neither am I to harm this body that belongs to God. Vicky's belongs to the Lord. Mine belongs to the Lord. And we don't want to hurt it in any way. And you may talk to somebody sometimes that is despondent, thinking about doing themselves some injury. Just point out that that's not our domain. That's not our prerogative. Any more than I can go over and harm you. I shouldn't be harming this body because it really is not mine to harm. It belongs to the Father. Yes, ma'am.
God gave us our bodies and our cars and stuff to use. He didn't give it to us to keep.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he gave us, Linda said, he gave us these things to utilize, not to keep as possessions. I heard one fella one time talk about his attitude towards his possessions. He said that he had this great car, right? You got a great car. He loved this car. And it was in some type of fender bender. And he was at the point, really being upset about what happened to his car. But then he said, anything, that's not my car. That's God's car. If God wants that car to have a dent in the fender, that's his business. It's not my, I'll get it fixed, but I'm going to be okay because it belongs to God. And that can help us. Keith Willingham and I spent a little time up in Mayfield, Kentucky, and we encountered people that lost everything, all the things, And those that seemed to be processing it the best were those that understood that they hadn't lost, the most important, and that was their family, that was their own life. And they realized, hey, God blessed me with that. He'll bless me again with something better maybe. It's kind of like Job's story, isn't it? Ultimately, at the end of the story, Job was better blessed than he was at the beginning of the story. And Job had a healthy view of the stuff that he had lost. It's not ours. It's God's. This is to me such a helpful parable, because again, it's not because the unjust steward was commended by the Lord, but the unjust steward, he does some things that we would do well to emulate in our lives. What are those things again? Understand there's a day of accounting, to be prepared for that, to be honest with ourselves, and to get busy for that day, to be making preparation for that day, and to be faithful in all the things that our Master has given us to manage. We have time to manage, we have intellect to manage, we have creativity to manage, we have money to manage, we have stuff to manage, we have family, in a sense, souls to try to better manage. And we need to do that to the very best of our ability. And then next week we're going to get into this, the rich man and Lazarus. And when we see rich man, I grew up thinking rich man, that's not me, but we are rich compared to some people in the world. But we don't want to have the attitude of this particular fellow. Linda?
I just want to say, I think the steward was trying to get on the good side of his master by getting some of his stuff back too, that maybe he had loaned out.
Yeah, Linda's saying there is a sense in the parable where, and the argument I think can be made that he does seem to accept, I've lost this job, but maybe if I give the master something, it'll help. But was he even intending to give the master any of that? Was he just going to keep all that for himself? He knew he was out of a job. I'm not sure if jail wasn't in his future, because he had seemingly done some things that were also illegal in this process. It's a fascinating parable to me. Any last thoughts or comments on this first Sunday of 2022? I appreciate you. I really do. I hope you have a blessed afternoon. Hope to see you back tonight at 5:30, and then we'll go home and have some snowball fights, right? Because weatherman says it's going to happen. It's going to happen.